This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. The Huskies Warming House podcast is also brought to you by the Soda Pod, home of NCAA college hockey news and more. Stay wild and up to date with new episodes throughout every week. Find them on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other podcast platforms. Welcome into the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 185. Nick Max and Noah Grant here in the den, and Nick, no men's hockey this week for St. Cloud, maybe a good thing, all things considered. Their opponent upcoming for this week had a very intriguing series that we'll dive into. Still some more men's hockey stuff on the table. On the women's side, St. Cloud State Huskies are 9-2, Nick.
They're rolling, bro. They are rolling. To put this in perspective, Noah, and I know this is the way too early, Nick Says Things segment of the show. They had 18 wins all last year. Mm-hmm. It's not even November. They have 9.
Yeah, agree.
So granted, there's a lot, not to say that the competition in non-conference was, for lack of, better or worse, but it's going to get tougher. We'll put it to you that way. Top 5 in the WCHA for women's, in the WCHA are all ranked in the top 11 in the coaches polls, in the women's pairwise. So it's going to be, shall we say, as much as I want to say that 9 wins is impressive, because it is, getting the next 9 and beyond is going to be a challenge.
Going to be a big test this week. Very good hockey at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center coming up this upcoming weekend. We're, of course, going to dive into that as well. And, of course, dissect everything around the WCHA and college hockey on the men's side as well, too. You won't want to miss it. And we start, as always, with Center Ice View News and Notes presented by HuskiesIllustrated.com and the Soda Pod. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to CenterIceView.com. Welcome into the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 185. Noah Grant alongside Nick Maxon here in the den, recording on Monday, October 30th. Release, of course, will be coming out on Tuesday. And if you're hearing this, it's because it's been released and the show is out. So, Nick, of course, before we get to some men's and women's college hockey news, we made some changes to the show where we're largely, of course, focusing on the Huskies and everything around college hockey. We'd be really remiss, though, Nick, if we didn't mention a former Duluth Bulldog in Adam Johnson, unfortunately losing his life the other night from a really unfortunate and tragic incident with a skate blade coming up, cutting his neck, and he ultimately did pass away later at the hospital, Nick. I think the whole hockey world is extremely stunned. Obviously, speaking to his hockey lineage in Minnesota hockey, it's very extensive. Scored his first point NHL goal in the Xcel Energy Center for Pittsburgh, in his home state. There's a lot to obviously look back on fondly, but at 29 years of age, Nick, a hockey player that has been gone way too soon.
Yeah, way too soon. It's a sobering reminder of the risks that pro athletes take on a nightly basis, and it's a unique to hockey too, right? Yep. At the end of it, it's an unfortunate accident. It's not something that you ever wish or think is possible. And most of the times, it's not something that is an issue. But here we are, right? And again, the important issue of note is that a young man playing the game that he grew up succeeding in, again, had success at the high school level with Hibbing. So that's, back in Pat Micheletti's side of the world, right?
Yeah.
And then going on to play UMD. Again, those two cities have a long connection of generating Division One, and then, as you mentioned, NHL talent. In fact, his only NHL goal that was recorded was again in his home state. And for anybody that laces up a pair of skates in the state of hockey, you can't really script that any better. To not to say cap off a dream, but to sort of say you've made it, right? Is to score your first goal in the Xcel Energy Center, whether it is a part of the hometown Minnesota Wild or unfortunately in an opposing team, right? I think there's a lot of significance to that. And to kind of wrap up the point here, Noah, it's devastating, right? You think of the player, his family, the hockey communities. Again, we mentioned UMD as well as Hibbing, and of course the Nottingham Panthers, I believe, was the team that he was part of over in the United Kingdom's English Ice Hockey League, as they call the EIHL. Who again suspended the game. They also suspended the games, I believe, on Sunday, and at the end of it too, I believe there's been some talks about possibly postponing more games that are due on the schedule.
Yeah, rule change done as well too. Mandatory net guards actually for the rest of the season, and I think that in years past, of course, a lot of players have worn the net guards where you put them on, you kind of wrap them around your neck, and I would not be shocked if there's going to be a greater emphasis, maybe even at the National Hockey League level, where they're going to start designing maybe undershirts. I think about a guy like Thomas Plekanec, right? Used to wear that kind of big turtleneck type thing. I think that I would imagine they might start implementing things related to that, where they're going to maybe start to put protection into the undershirts so they don't look bulky, they don't look out of place, but they're fitting and protective for a lot of these players. Of course, no reminder for anybody who's been following the game, but Clint Malarchuk in '89, Richard Zednik in the early 2000s, a couple of really strong examples of close calls that we were fortunate, to have go the other direction. So I definitely think there's going to be a lot of changes in the game of hockey related to equipment. And it's something that, it's almost 2024, Nick. It's something that, hockey's been around since the 1800s. It's kind of wild to think that this is something that we're having a discussion about with the advances in technology, the advances in whatever. And I don't know that it maybe has had such a prominent following because things don't happen regularly like this.
No.
But I think when you have someone pass away at such a young age, as tragic as it is to say, we wish Adam's family and of course all those surrounding him, the Bulldog community, the team over in England, of course, anybody, Pittsburgh Penguins, Wilkes-Barre Scranton had a really good tribute the other night, wishing them all the best. But I think there is going to be a lot of positive coming out of this. I think there's going to be change for the better here. I would be kind of surprised if there's not. And I think there's going to be more emphasis on the equipment.
Now, since you mentioned the 1880s or 1890s back.
That's Nick's birth year. Yeah.
I know. Right. Remember, this was a game that started off where the goaltender was not allowed to go off his feet to make a save.
Yeah.
Right. So and the reason I bring that up is, you mentioned how hockey has evolved. Right. Now, granted, when I played, I wore a neck guard. I'll admit it, I did. And to a degree, I think that, the players who wear them or with the youth that wear them, I would imagine the bulk of the change will be at the youth hockey level for sure. I think it's going to be a little bit slower for the pros, although you do wonder if a pro player and the consequences of this unfortunate accident maybe makes some players think twice about it. But as you mentioned, I think there's going to be a greater emphasis on it. I mean, we talk about it every week. No, this game is fast. It's physical. You got players falling, and again, you do sort of wonder, and it's hard to describe it without being so blunt. You kind of wonder how it doesn't happen more often just because of the nature of the sport. We're glad that it doesn't, and again, as we mentioned before, this is not ever something we ever want to have a discussion about here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. It is unfortunate, but like you said, you do hope that, there's positive that comes out of this and a change that helps better protect players while they play this amazing game.
And Nick, we're almost a year removed and then some. Let's not forget January 2022. I was trying to jog my memory. I was like, why does this feel familiar? Don't forget, you remember Teddy Balkin, by the way, the high school hockey player who ended up dying, 16 years of age, exactly similar story. And, back-to-back deaths within about a 2-year span here now with something like this. I imagine, like you said, change at the youth level. A lot of players don't wear them, one, because they're uncomfortable, and two, because they're a little bit unsightly. It's kind of the same conversation that they have at the NHL level with, wearing visors, face shields versus like full cages and things like that. I mean, it's kind of a little bit about the look. Same with guys who don't wear ear guards. I know a lot of guys that have gotten hit with pucks or other objects. They don't wear ear guards, and they've had some things go on as well too. So, would not be shocked if there's changes, but I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis and at least intrigue into the way equipment might be made after recent events. So wishing Adam's family, like we mentioned, in the hockey community, nothing but the best. A really sad story coming out this past weekend. We'd be remiss if we didn't address it here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. In more positive news, as we alluded to, St. Cloud State on the women's side is rolling right now. 9-2 is their record. WCHA, that didn't give them much help this past week, though, unfortunately, although they came close. The team that the Huskies, a couple of teams that St. Cloud would be watching would be the Gophers and Duluth. So Duluth this weekend, a 2-1 victory against Bemidji State. Had the Beavs pulled one of those games out or pushed that one to overtime for a victory, would have helped the Huskies quite a bit, I believe. And then on Saturday, of course, Duluth taking care of business 6-0 against the Beavers. On the other side, it was Ohio State on that Saturday beating the Minnesota Golden Gophers 6-5 in an 11-goal contest. The night before, it was Ohio State, the Buckeyes, winning in overtime 4-3. The Gophers garner a point across the weekend based on the overtime loss. And Wisconsin taking on St. Thomas, 5-3 was the victory on Friday, 3-0 on Saturday. That St. Thomas team giving a little bit more fits to teams early on, though. I'm kind of curious to see if they're maybe a little bit closer than people thought in the women's realm. So some interesting scores. And why is it interesting? Well, let's put it to you this way. Minnesota Duluth and the Gophers, according to the WCHA standings right now, sit below the St. Cloud State Huskies right now. Huskies currently in third place in the WCHA. Nick alluded to it earlier on in the show. 18 points of the Wisconsin Badgers top the grouping 6-0 on the season. They've only allowed 4 total goals in conference play. Ohio State 1 point behind at 17 after a strong showing against the Gophers. A .944 win percentage. And then right behind them, the St. Cloud State Huskies, 12 points. They've only lost once in conference play, an .800 winning percentage in the WCHA, 9-2 overall. Duluth is tied with them at 12. They have one more game played, and they lost that extra game they played. Gophers at 10 points, rounding out the top 5. They and the Bulldogs both have a .667 win percentage. But the Gophers have the same number of games played as St. Cloud, because don't forget they matched up against each other on that Tuesday. So, and then Bemidji State, Mankato, and St. Thomas, all 6 contests for them have yet to find a win for all 3 of those programs. So the bottom 3 really having a tough showing early on in the season. But St. Cloud State, again, we mentioned it, 9-2 in the open, an .818 winning percentage. They're 4-0 at home, 2-0 at neutral sites, and 3-2 on the road. So if they can just find a way to kind of clean up some of their road game, it's going to be advantageous. They've got a big test coming up this week at home, Nick. But before we get to those, we have to get to last week's scores. Before we get to those, overall in the WCHA, Nick, what's your impression of last weekend?
What the heck's wrong with the Gophers defensively?
Yeah, and this is something we talked about too with their roster turnover. It might be a little more interesting than maybe we thought. People were giving it credit for. Maybe,
and because at the end of it, I think we expect them to figure it out. But at the end of it too, that the Gophers, when and we'll say it this way, Ohio State's a good squad, right? 6-5 though. I mean, that screams a track meet to me, right? Up and back and forth down the ice. And that's sort of, at least in the past, the Gophers were sort of the trailblazers in that kind of style of hockey just because they had the talent, right? WCHA has got 5 teams that can play a track meet and can keep up with you. I get the sense, Noah, and I'm not sure if you feel the same way, that this is obviously a style that's not at all sustainable, but you do kind of wonder that it's sort of the way they're playing now as they're getting things figured out defensively. Granted, it's not that they're bad. Again, for the Gophers goal differential, I think they've scored 30 given up 12.
Yep.
So it's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but you do kind of wonder with some of those high scoring affairs that, there's still some ironing of the wrinkles per se defensively by Brad Frost.
Yeah, certainly would agree. And, Ohio State, a very good team. We had them picked in the preseason polling for us to finish atop the conference. So obviously a very tough opponent, 2 close hockey games. So, there is that to be said, but it'll be interesting to kind of follow through. You kind of compare, you said 30 goals for overall, 22 in conference play. To compare, St. Cloud State, 32 goals for and 14 in conference play. Huskies have a plus 24 goal differential across 5 games. It's actually better than the Gophers right now. So, I mean, you look at the success rate that that the Huskies have had. It's been really impressive. Speaking of St. Cloud, they took on Mankato this weekend. Mankato having a really tough start. Oh, by the way, goal differential, one more point. Overall, of course, non-conference bolstering this. St. Thomas has 29 goals for, 42 against. So out of the bottom 3 teams, they've actually been the most productive in terms of scoring. They just have been on the wrong end of a couple of hockey games, unfortunately. But moving back to Mankato, this was in Mankato, Mayo Clinic Events Center. Friday night's game had an attendance of 107. Huskies win 3-1 on the scoreboard, outshooting the Mavs, doubling up on shots and then some. 31-14 was the total. 14-8 in period number 1, 10-4 in period number 2, and 7-2 in period number 3. The Huskies locking things down in the second half of that hockey game. St. Cloud just under 500 in the dot, 26 wins, 28 losses. They were 1 for 4 on the power play and perfect 2 for 2 on the kill. It was actually Mankato that got the scoring started very early in this hockey game, less than a minute in. And then the Huskies had to respond about 7.5 minutes later. Grace Wolf, her second of the season. Alice Surreal and Avery Farrell tallying assists there. And then Emma Gentry unassisted, her 4th of the year with just over 3 minutes to play in period number 1. Taylor Lind adds a power play goal less than 3 minutes into period number 2. Emma Gentry and Clara Hemlerova with the helpers there. And that was all we wrote. Sonia Hola finally, getting beat with a puck, apparently. 13 of 14 in terms of the saves there. Mighty impressive, all things considered, for the Huskies, doing everything they needed to do. Mankato, maybe not the strongest opponent. You maybe would have liked to see the score spread in this game, and we'll talk about the next game a little bit larger, just how the Huskies have been rolling. But the reality of it is, and we talked about this in the WCHA for years and years, Nick, especially when the Huskies were on the other side of some of these scores, win's a win, and a regulation victory is a regulation victory. The Huskies did a great job on Friday night.
They did, and as you mentioned, Sonia Hola, her shutout streak of 4 straight games ends with just 1 goal against. I mean, that's just insane.
Incredible. Well, I guess I should say good that it ended early in that hockey game too. I think just to move on, and it's like, all right, now we're in one. We got to find our way back in the game. Huskies responded beautifully. They
did. And to your point, with the score differential, again, you when you score a bunch, right, it feels good. We're going to talk about how Wisconsin has put up some crooked numbers early in their season. That's the Huskies' next opponent. But at the end of the day, you mentioned it perfectly. A win's a win. And I think with Brian Idalski, I think he'd be more happy, regardless of how many goals you score offensively. I don't think he cares whether it's 2, 3, or 10, as long as it's 2, 1, or 0 that you're giving up. I think he'd be happy with that. Again, the PK, his defensive first style, for the most part, that's what, his identity wants to be tough to play against. I think that's what he really is looking for. And at the end of the day, like you mentioned, a W is a W, and a 3-1 the victory on Friday.
Yeah, certainly would agree. Saturday score 2-0 in favor of the Huskies, attendance of 201 there. Assistant referee Shannon Motzko. Don't know the relation there, but just want to throw that out, by the way. Interesting in hockey circles, if you know anything about St. Cloud hockey. And, we were just talking about the Gophers on the women's side, something to do with the men's side in that particular last name. I don't know. Shots 26 aside in this one. Oh, wow. 13 13-8 in period number 1 for the St. Cloud Huskies. It was actually 12-6 in favor of Mankato in the middle period, and then 7-6 the Huskies take home the victory with the shot total in period number 3. Neither team scoring on the man advantage. 0 for 2 for the Huskies, 0 for 4 for the Mavs. A very paltry 18 for 47 though in the faceoff dot for the Huskies. That's got to be better, Nick. That's a 3.82, 38% winning percentage. That's got to be better. There's no excuse for that. That's you have to have possession from the puck drop. We talked about it on the men's side too. St. Cloud got to be better in the dot. Both goals coming very timely into and out of periods. So tail end of period number 1, Dale Ross's third of the season. Taylor Lind and Laura Zimmerman tallying assists with 1.5 minutes to go in period number 1. And then 34 seconds into the third, Grace Wolf, multi-goal weekend for her third of the season. Clara Himlerova, multi-point weekend. She tallied an assist in this one as well. JoJo Chobak, perfect, 26 of 26. But yeah, Nick, I mean, you look at the face-off groupings here. Katie Kaufman, 7 for 7. Addie Scribner had 3 attempts, only won 1 of them. Taylor Lind was exactly 500. Clara Himlerova, 5 wins, 10 losses. Emma Gentry, 2 wins, 6 losses. Avery Farrell didn't win a draw. You know, like it's for the great scores that the Huskies have had. And I know it sounds nitpicky, and I do want to get your thoughts, of course, on this game too, but it sounds nitpicky, but you have to be nitpicky. When you start a season 9-2, you're getting ready to play a top tier opponent in the WCHA, one of the most well-coached teams historically over the past 2 decades. Those are the things that can win and lose hockey games. It sounds silly, but if you don't take care of special teams, if you're not winning puck possession early on in faceoffs and having great coverage, you know, a game that's 2-0, that opening goal could be a faceoff loss in the defensive zone. And just like that, it's in the back of your neck. This Badgers team coming up this weekend will not hesitate. They took care of Mankato, Nick, on Saturday. Your thoughts overall on Saturday's game and the weekend? And one of the areas that the Huskies maybe actually do need to clean up despite the great start.
So let's address it a couple different ways, right? No, it's not nitpicky. Number 1. Number 2, anybody who's played the game of hockey knows that the face-off draw in today's day and age to, you know, have possession of the puck. Again, face-offs, right? Assistant coaches, you're drawing up. What do you do if you win it? What do you do if you lose it, right? You have assignments either way. I'll tell you what, the assignment's a lot more fun when the puck's in your possession. I'll put it to you that way. And let's just say that good teams like Wisconsin take advantage when the puck is on their stick. So at the end of it, you're absolutely right. And we talked about the woes in the men's side and the details and those types of things. It's the nitpicky. This is what we're talking about. It's winning in the draws. It's also then, you know, okay, well, if you lose a draw, are you contesting the puck, right? Are you winning board battles? These are the details, the stick positioning, your body positioning, you know, driving players and funneling pucks into areas that can induce a turnover or to, you know, put you in a good spot into, shall we say, not a weak spot, but you know what I mean. Anyways, my train of thought's gone.
Disadvantageous positioning.
Yes, thank you. So at the end of it, these are the things that separate the good teams from the great teams. And here's the great news about this conversation. No, we're having this discussion with the women's team that for the last couple of years that we've covered them on this podcast, and honestly, before we started this, we saw the talent. We saw that there was a possibility, the potential was there. And, you know, it's been...
They were on the other end of these scores.
Yeah. And it's been disheartening to see that, you know, these are the things that were causing their losses, right? And how many times have we seen in the past where they played Wisconsin tough, but a mistake here or a mistake there cost them a game, right? It's these sort of details that will make or break potentially a win or a loss. So I don't blame you for that. And they're going to have to be ready because if you look at Wisconsin, yikes.
Yeah.
To give folks some perspective on Wisconsin, right? They've scored 74 times this season. 74.
They've only played 10 games.
And they played 10 games. They have scored 8 or more goals in 1, 2, 3, 4 times. They've got a 16-1 win, a 12-2 win, a 9-0 win, and an 8-1 win. For lack of a better words, they play St. Thomas actually played him tough, 5-3 plus 3-0. So honestly, not terribly, but at the end of the day, this is where all these things you talk about structurally and executing and transition play, it's the consistency of everything that you're trying to accomplish as a hockey team has to come together for this Wisconsin squad, because this is the team because they're that talented, right? We talked in the past, and I've talked to, with our sister podcast with NCAA, how essentially when your team is not playing well, hard work will almost always win over talent in most cases. However, talent can beat you at times. Wisconsin has enough talent where they can take advantage of a small mistake. They can do that. They've only given up 10. They're a plus 64 in their goal differential in the season. So, it's a challenge, but I think, I'm going to kick this back to you, Noah. It comes down to one, and you talk about how it sounds kind of cliche. First, it comes down to confidence. You have to have the confidence to go out there and to feel like that the structure you're playing, that your assignments, your inner skill, whether it's distributing of the puck, shooting the puck, maybe causing hell in front of the opposing netminder, that's going to be something you can go out there and actually win with. So they got their hands full, but a game with St. Thomas, who again, they haven't won a game in WCHA yet through 6 contests. There was, 2 goals in the 3. That's one of the closer matchups that Wisconsin has had all year so far.
Yeah, it certainly was. Like you mentioned, goal diff conference-wise 35-4, so plus 31 for Wisconsin. St. Cloud's only given up 5 in the WCHA, so good comparison there. They don't score at the rate that Wisconsin does, but that's not St. Cloud's game. I mean, they've been scoring well enough to be serviceable, but it doesn't. You have to score more than the opponents. It sounds quite obvious. Speaking of which, Nick, as we preview this Wisconsin series, some really fun statistics that are great to talk about on the St. Cloud women's side. Just under 3 goals per game for this group. Nick, they've given up 0.7 goals per game this year. Mighty impressive. Almost 20% on the power play, 92% on the kill, Nick. They've only given up 3 in 36 opportunities. It's been very good for this grouping. 9 power play goals themselves. Great shooters, and they're taking care of business all over the ice. I mean, it's really great to see for this group. And then, you talk about these individual leaders. We will mention the goalies in a second. Klara Himlarova paces the group with 11 points, the first multi-point getter for the team this season, a point per game player for these Huskies, plus 9. She leads the team in goals, 6 goals, 5 assists. The team leaders in assists are actually Katie Kaufman and Ella Onik. Good to see that defensive activation too. We talked about the game that Ella Onik has brought as well too. You have to have a catalyst like that. For the men in years past, it's been a guy like Nick Perbix. It's been Jack Ashawn, like guys that are able to provide that offense from the back end. It just helps supplement things so well. And then on the goaltending side, Nick, I disgusting. I mean, Sonny Ahola, people started 5 games, has played a total of 6 contests. She has a .990 save percentage.
That's ridiculous.
She has allowed 1 goal in 299 minutes of hockey.
That's just insane.
5 games played, 4 shutouts. JoJo Chobak, who by comparison looks extremely poor in 7 contests with a .957.
Imagine saying that. Your .957 is poor compared to your goaltending partner.
2 shutouts and 4 victories, 6 goals allowed. A total that is 7 total goals allowed between these 2 goaltenders over the first 9 contests of the season, Nick. And the Huskies have lost 2 games, by the way. Empty netters notwithstanding in the Gopher game. This Badgers team is going to be very good. There's no doubt about that as this women's team prepares. Nick, these games are must-watch hockey. If you are a WCHA / Big Ten whatever fan, you have got to tune in for these contests. On Friday, it is a 3:00 Central Time start. This one is at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center this weekend, people. Saturday, 1:00 Central Time on November 4th. Your butts better be in the seat if you're in the Granite City and you've got nothing to do. This team would welcome a raucous home crowd. This should be a good weekend of hockey. This will be the first true litmus test, besides playing the Gophers in the single game set a couple of Tuesdays ago, where over the course of a weekend, we're going to get a good look at how for real this St. Cloud team is. They've had a hot start. They're a top 10 team in the country right now.
They are.
Do they belong, Nick? We're going to find out this weekend. Boy, how could you not be excited? How could you not be excited about Huskies hockey this weekend?
You have to be licking your chops, honestly. I'll be at the rink on Friday. I'll be calling the game on Big Ten Plus. Potentially Saturday's game for Fox 9 Plus. We're still waiting on confirmation with that. Hoping to be doing both games, but we'll definitely welcome the opportunity for Friday. Because as you mentioned, you took the words of my mouth. This is the litmus test, right? This is this is my measuring stick. Where are we at? And, haven't had a chance to Brian yet to talk to him, I should say. But, I would imagine, Noah, if you're the head coach of the Huskies, right? And you're looking at your body of work that you've put up yet. And like any coach, you're going to be happy with some things. You're going to want to, have some things improve here. But I want to ask you, because I think this is something that maybe we forget as hockey fans sometimes. And that is, you can either respect your opponent and you can essentially play up to your competition. And what I mean by that is two things, because it could actually mean very different things. One is you rise, you stick to what's been working, you execute the way you can, and you come away with a victory. Or the other side of that coin is when I say play up, that means you feel like on an individual basis, you got to do more to get past the proverbial Goliath, right? But then you get out of your structure, you start chasing the game a bit, and you feel like you have to do more with less because that's what it's going to take. So you're cheating the game, and then all of a sudden you're on the opposite side of the win-loss column, right? So I think the biggest test really isn't the structure. It's not the talent, but I would argue, Noah, and correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest challenge for the Huskies is to believe in themselves and believe in what and how they are playing the game, and that it can be a formula for success.
It is a mental battle. Don't forget last season, of course, in front of a crowd of almost 15,000, the Huskies got a 1-0 victory against these Badgers. Nick, when you look at this matchup, in years past, we've talked about, where they were going to stand, what they could do. Like you said, could they match them pound for pound? They historically have played Wisconsin tight, at least in a couple of games over the course of the season. Number one, from a coaching perspective, if you're Brian Idalski, Janelle Sergey and staff, you're not satisfied. You're not satisfied with where you're at. You're 9-2. You probably could be 10-1. You probably could still have another victory in there. You still have a lot of things to clean up. You can't be satisfied. You got to be focused on improving your process. Like you said, you have to look inward and say, you know what? We've got the ability to be even better than we already have. The second thing that I will say, and Nick, we've waited almost 4 years to say this. If the Huskies play Wisconsin this weekend and they come out of this weekend with no points on the board, it will be a disappointment.
Yep.
It will be a disappointment because of how well that they've played this season. Things are really coming together. Now, if anything, you want to make sure hockey games are close, regardless of the score, make sure that you're doing your job to give yourself a chance every night. But the way this team has been playing, the way that structurally they've looked good, they clean up a little bit of things in the faceoff dot. They continue to do a lot of things right. They get good goaltending. They should grab points from this Badgers team this weekend. And that is that phrase almost puts chills down my spine just thinking about the progress that this Huskies women's team has made over the past 3.5 years. This is what we talked about, the belief in this program when Brian Idalski was hired a 1.5 years ago, trying to continue an already started process from a really great freshman group that is now upperclassmen, seniors, graduate players. Man, Nick, it's going to be a great weekend of hockey, and I seriously can't wait for action in the WCHA. Anything else you want to add before we switch to the men?
Yeah, honestly, why as a fan would you not want to come out and watch this team?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I know we plug this team and we have been for a while, but I don't know in our brief 4 to 5 year history of covering this team that there has not been a more exciting time to be a fan of this squad.
Yeah.
Honestly, the talent level that's there, the coaching that's there. I mean, you've got arguably the best goaltending tandem in the nation. I would beg to argue that there's not a better goaltending team in the entire Division I women's college hockey rankings. There isn't one. I guarantee you that. Is this team going to have the most flashy offensive talent? No. But some of the scariest teams, Noah, are the ones that win by committee. And I will tell you one thing about watching the squad through their parts of the season, they get contributions up and down this lineup. They do. And that's a team where is more scary than a team that's got just a filthy top six, but maybe that bottom of six, is just a different skill level, right? This team can get inputs from all 12. Their defense is active. Again, they protect their own goaltenders and they make it a nightmare for their opponent's goaltenders.
You know what, Nick? And this maybe concludes our point. You said it perfectly. The last grouping that you just said describing this hockey team, it sounds like you're talking about Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is a very deep team. We're talking about St. Cloud. We're talking about this team that has a chance to really do some damage. They could potentially, for the first time in a long time, take 2 games away from Wisconsin this weekend. It's going to be very exciting. I honestly can't wait. Nick, getting ready to move over to the men's side here. Of course, men were off last weekend. They get ready for a big test this week. Before we preview that, we, of course, have to recap everything going on around college hockey last week. A couple of scores of note outside of NCHC teams. Alaska Anchorage beating Penn State 6-5 last weekend. That was intriguing. On the men's side, you want to talk Badger hockey. How about a sweep 5-2 and 3-2 over the Golden Gophers? Gophers have some things to clean up. This Wisconsin Badgers / Mankato 2.0 team is not half bad out of the gate. Nope. So it should be interesting as far as that's concerned. Only other notable scores, Maine beating Quinnipiac in overtime. Quinnipiac came back and won the second night, but keep an eye at how good is that Quinnipiac team going to be. Clarkson also had a good victory on Saturday. I believe it was Michigan Tech, if memory serves me right. Yes, 3-1 was the final score in that one. So a couple things to keep an eye on here. As far as NCHC teams were concerned, though, Nick, also, Harvard tied Dartmouth 1-1 in overtime. Don't know how good Dartmouth and Harvard are respectively. Dartmouth historically has not been, so keep an eye on that. From what the pairwise usually indicates through the first month of the season, Harvard's usually the best team in college hockey. But with that being said, Western Michigan and St. Cloud were both off this weekend in NCHC play. Non-conference action for the other teams. Colorado College and Denver had a flip-flop of the same opponent. Colorado College and Denver both beat Air Force 6-2 for the Tigers, 4-0 for Denver, respectively. On the other side, it was Augustana 4-3 on Saturday over Colorado College. They played Denver to a 5-5 finish on that Friday night. This Augustana team, Garrett Raboyne and company, not too shabby.
No. And you talk about going into the belly of the beast, right, for the Vikings from Augustana, again, first-year Division I program, will be full CCHA members as of next year. And, it's weird to say that there are moral victories. We talked about this with St. Thomas over the last couple of years. There's not really any that exist, but if you're Augustana and you go to places like the Tigers and the Pios and you tie and beat them over the weekend, that's a pretty damn good weekend.
Yeah, certainly is. Speaking of not damn good weekends, the Duluth Bulldogs, if I can say that appropriately, outscored 7-1 on the weekend, 4-1 and 3-0 over Cornell. This Cornell team is very good and could be a contender moving through the season. Really good recap of that. Like you said, sister channel from the Soda Pod, NCAA. That show comes out on Wednesday of this week. Max Veach has a really good breakdown of his Duluth Bulldogs and their breakdown essentially this weekend. A lot of things to clean up. The Huskies have them in a couple of weeks, so keep an eye on that. But this Cornell team, a lot of parity between East versus West. Keep an eye on that. Nebraska Omaha, or Omaha as I should say, UNO, getting ready to play Ohio State. It was 2-2 on Friday and 4-0 Buckeyes on Saturday. So Omaha, a bit of an interesting weekend. A lot to take away from on both sides, I think, if you're a Mavs fan entering the following week. North Dakota, speaking of Mavs teams, beating Mankato 6-2 on that initial Friday night before a 2-2 finish on Saturday. North Dakota might be willing to play with a little bit of fire here and have a little bit of kickback, a little bit more than we maybe expected early on in the season. So keep an eye on them. Mankato, obviously usually atop the CCHA. It'll be intriguing to see how that conference shakes out in and of itself. So,
Yep.
Nick, final score that we need to get through over the course of the weekend, and it's one that's pertinent if you're a Huskies fan. 5-4, the Redhawks win on Friday. 1-1 was the score Saturday against Arizona State. The Redhawks taking them on. Of course, don't forget the Sun Devils will be part of the NCHC next season. Miami will be part of the first NCHC action slate for the Huskies this upcoming weekend. Redhawks grouping not looking half bad, Nick. A very good test. Their first real challenging showing over the course of the season, and they certainly did not disappoint.
No, they did not. And for us and maybe our predictions, right? Let's just say that, might as well just, roll some 6 die or whatnot, and you might have a better shot where things are landing at the moment. But just as much as we say it's early for St. Cloud, it's early for Miami, right?
Yep.
But let's say they've been impressive, 4-1-1 as their record. And Arizona State has actually been pretty hot out of the gate themselves. So that's nothing to scoff at if you're a Redhawks fan. But Noah, does this throw a little bit of heart palpitations to Huskies fans, only to think that in years past, if we ever opened up the NCHC versus a Colorado College of Miami, and maybe at times in Omaha, it's going to be a battle like it always is, but you kind of felt like, okay, we'll probably figure out a way to get, 2 wins out of the deal. I can imagine the way the Huskies are playing or have played. Yes, they get a week off, and you hope that there's a lot of attention paid to film, that this isn't going to be the same approach mentally for Huskies fans, I should say, going into this weekend, because Miami looks like they're playing some pretty good hockey, and at the end of the day, this is sort of a put up or shut up weekend for the Huskies. I mean, and I think you would agree with me on this. It feels early to say that. This doesn't feel like the Huskies have gained really much of any consistent traction so far through the first month of the season. And now with the conference points on the line and an opportunity to sort of rewrite the history books for this year starting this weekend, you got to start it off right away on Friday, right? And Miami's looking like they're going to be a pretty darn formidable opponent early on. So that can go both ways, right? In my case, it's good and it's bad, right? It's bad because they're playing good hockey, right? The good news is sometimes you need to be put up against the best to be brought out your best. And I really hope that is the formula we get for the Huskies. But let's just say they're going to have a lot of things to prove on the ice. And oh boy, this weekend has, I think, massive implications on where their season trajectory could go.
Yeah, certainly would agree. I think if you would have taken both against Fairbanks, depending on how you thought you played last weekend, would have felt a little bit better. Maybe snagging one from Mankato, considering you dropped the 2-goal lead. Just a lot of negative things entering into that bye week early on. Huskies maybe needed it, though, like you mentioned. If you want to be technical, Nick, because, of course, the NCHC officially gets underway and rolling. 6 of the 8 teams are in conference action this upcoming week. Theoretically, if you want to do non-NCHC, NCHC standings in a variety of facets here, I did that on an Excel spreadsheet to the best of my ability, largely based on winning percentage in games played, among other things. But if you want to be technical, Western Michigan atop the standings, St. Cloud State at the bottom at number 8. The Huskies, the only team, even with the sweep against for the Bulldogs, they are still over 500 in 7th place. Western Michigan at an 8.75 winning percentage, goal differential of +8. CC, North Dakota, Miami, CC is an 8.33 winning percentage. They played 6. They're 5-1 on the season. North Dakota, Miami, and DU all respectively a 750 winning percentage, all 4-1-1. And then UNO, the Mavericks, sitting at a 625 with a 2-1-1, kind of a weird blip. They haven't played much. The Bulldogs have played the most of any grouping with 7 games played, 3-2-2. They're at a 571. Huskies, we talked about this, 2-2-2 or 2-4 overall, a 333 winning percentage. Nick, the worst goal differential besides the Huskies in the NCHC, and don't forget, it was a -6 goal differential for the Bulldogs last week. still has them at +2 over the course of the season. St. Cloud's at a -5, the only negative team in the NCHC. Yeah, this is a big weekend. This is a big weekend against a Redhawks team that is red hot right now. And this is a St. Cloud team that is absolutely reeling. If you want to stay pat in the NCAA, if you want to feel like you've got a bit of confidence entering in the conference portion of the season, and of course some non-conference games against big-time opponents in Michigan and Bemidji State, of course, who's having an interesting season, as is the entire CCHA. You've got to kind of start locking things down. This is a great weekend to see what the Huskies are going to be made of. Great couple of weeks moving ahead. It's kind of do or die time for this Huskies team, because I don't feel like the rest of the conference is going to shut up and wait for them. And this Redhawks team certainly has a chance to maybe take both from St. Cloud. They've done it before against a Huskies team that was very good. This Redhawks team historically has given St. Cloud fits in recent years. Other action, by the way, of course, this one is in St. Cloud. Don't forget, again, if you want an excuse to watch good hockey and two teams that need your support for two very different reasons right now, and it's flip-flop of the reasons that we've normally been accustomed to, Huskies play at 7:30 Central Time on that Friday night. Don't forget, women play at 3 that day. Then women play at 1 o'clock on Saturday. The men's game for this one will be at 6 o'clock Central Time. So you can get an entire weekend of hockey that should be good in the Granite City. Other NCHC games, Western Michigan back in action. They travel to Baxter Arena in Omaha. CC, the Gold Pan matchup, home and home against Denver to start the year there. Non-conference North Dakota will not get into NCHC action next week. It'll be traveling to Boston University, and Duluth, of course, will be playing the Gophers. Max Veach did a great breakdown for us on MNCAA as well, too. But, Nick, you look around at all of these standings. Wisconsin, Maine, Providence, Miami, New Hampshire round out your top 5 in the pairwise if you want to have some wild fun with it. Huskies puck drop, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, November 3rd. What's got to happen against this Redhawks team for them to right the ship here against a Miami team that maybe might not finish dead last in the cellar in the NCHC right now?
Let's just say you have to come out and you have to be ready at the drop of the puck. If there's one thing we've noticed about St. Cloud this year, and it's been, sometimes we've seen this in years past where the Huskies take a couple of minutes to get to the game. They don't have 2 to 5 minutes. They got to be ready, and they have to be driving possession. They have to be on their toes. And whether it's, maybe take a page out of Omaha's book and maybe just, it's just simply getting pucks deep. And then, maybe just throwing some bodies around, just kind of get you into the game a little bit, right? Not to say you want to be reckless, because that can go back the other way, right? But I think you have to set the tone early. And from what we've seen, St. Cloud is more successful if they score first, too. I think they have to pop the first one. Again, we talk about how some of these things seem cliche, how they seem like, it's a small detail, but St. Cloud has been, shall we say, on the other side of the details that the other teams are executing right now. So to me, that's the two biggest things for St. Cloud. Yes, you have to be ready to go. You have to have energy. And chances are, if you are the one that's dictating the play, good bounces and maybe you get some puck luck. Again, this team is much different when they pop the first one, at least so far in this early young season. No, I would imagine those two are on your list as well, but do you have anything else?
Yeah, scoring first and sustaining leads 2 and 3 when they've scored first, and they lost the only game when the opponent got on the board first. The Huskies have had decent starts, but it's kind of more about having that killer mentality. Is once you're on the board, can you lock it down? Can you extend the lead? That's what St. Cloud teams in years past have been able to do. And again, this Miami grouping, they've shown in recent years that they've been able to score in bunches. So as you mentioned, you got to be ready at the start and finish of every period, of course. As my broadcast partner in Minot, Ken Oda, has a buddy that likes to say, he says, if you're good in the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of each period, you should have a good outcome. So, I mean, it's very much true. And I mean, you look at the numbers, when we talk with Max talking about the Bulldogs on MNCAA, 20% is the power play, 80% is the PK, very middling, par for the course, okay numbers in the NCHC. Not good enough for this Huskies squad right now. They've just got to be better. They're under 500 in the pairwise points percentage. Quite obviously, they're in the 40s in the pairwise, although it's way too early to be looking at that intently with any sort of confidence. But what we can confidently say is this is a big test for St. Cloud. Miami has not necessarily been that team. They've been in and out as far as the Huskies grouping, where they've given them fits, especially last year, a couple of shootout victories for the Huskies that gave them a challenge in the middle of their swoon, so to speak. Don't forget, 2 years removed from scoring the biggest goal differential weekend in NCHC history against this Redhawks team. This is not your grandpa's Redhawks team of 2 years ago. It's not the 2013 team either, but
no,
they've started very well. They've shown us what they can do. St. Cloud's got to get it done. I know that sounds vague. I know we've been harping on it for quite a bit, but
let me fuel the fire for you.
Well, the big challenge for Brett Larson is just, you know what? We've seen him have a lineup card that has maybe worked, maybe not. We've seen the lineup card flipped over. Formula has not been found in the chemistry lab right now for this Huskies team. And it's not like it's, if so-and-so doesn't play well, you slot him in and he's going to be a bulldog and it's going to fix all the problems and we're going to get a different look. It's the different look still hasn't been the right one. Huskies got to figure it out quick.
Let's fuel the fire, as I mentioned before. Last time the Huskies technically lost, meaning got swept by Miami. So remember, last February, they had 2 ties, technically a 1-1 and a 3-3 tie.
Yep.
But Noah, how long ago since that either building was St. Cloud swept by the Redhawks?
Oh, I'm gonna say probably inaugural year or second year. I'm gonna go with inaugural year in the NCHC.
Was not. It actually was in 2016, 2017. It was in Oxford, Ohio. It was a 4-1 loss on Saturday, a 3-2 loss on Friday, but that was in Oxford. You have to go back to 2014, 2015 to find the last time that actually, I take that back. I misread that. It actually goes back a little bit further. Yep, it goes back to, it was 13-14 when they got swept last by the Redhawks at home. It was March 14th and 15th, both 1-goal contests, 5-4, and then 4-3 respectively Friday and Saturday.
Would that not have been the year that Miami upset them in the NCHC quarterfinal? Does that not sound correct?
But either way, that's...
Well, Nick, I guess...
that's almost 10 years ago.
To ask the obvious broadcaster question in the room, why do you bring up such a statistic from the Redhawks?
Because at the end of the day, when you look at the history, 30 wins, 19 losses, 6 ties over this, it means absolutely nothing right now.
Yeah, and
it means nothing.
And what you're saying is there's a serious possibility that the Redhawks could do that this weekend based on the way St. Cloud has been playing. Now,
and also based on the way Miami's playing.
Now, we could have a weekend where the Huskies figure it out. Week off did them great. They sweep the other direction. Good large score spreads, complete package throughout 120 minutes of hockey. And we're having a totally different conversation. We'd love to see it. We're not there yet, Nick. We're not there yet.
And again, one weekend, great, but then they got to follow it up, right? But you got to start somewhere at the end of the day.
Yep.
This would be a great time to get things started. Hope that, again, like you mentioned, they, put some eyes to the film room and have worked some things out in practice, and would be curious to see, again, if there's any additional lineup movements or changes, right? Because at the end of the day, like you said, the chemistry lab hasn't come up with the compounds that they're mixing up that they've been wanting, not the reaction that they wanted. So let's continue the chemistry puns while we're at it. It's been less than, a flashbang, and they definitely need to, like you said, figure out the right formula, or else things aren't looking too good.
Yeah, it's not going to be great. And don't forget, of course, maybe they get some reinforcements back. Guys get back to full strength. I believe backup netminder James Gray was nursing a bit of an injury too. So maybe you start to see some guys get a little bit more healthy over the course of the last 2 weeks too. So, Huskies need your support. I mean, you should be in for all 4 of these games. If you're not doing anything in the Granite City or making a trip up there, go see some hockey. Huskies hockey on the docket. I know Miami is not a big name opponent. Wisconsin a little bit bigger on the WCHA side, but all 4 games will be pertinent right now because if you're Brett Larson, got to focus on the first 5 minutes, first 20, first night, go from there. Can't look at the bigger picture. Just got to kind of stay in the moment a little bit and try to get things done. Should be good. So women's team playing at 3 o'clock and 1 o'clock Friday, Saturday against the Wisconsin Badgers. Men's side, of course, I believe it's 7:30 and 6 o'clock Friday, Saturday, respectively, against the Miami Redhawks. All 4 games at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center in the Granite City. Should be good. We'll be here to recap it all next week. For Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the Den.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.